During this period of lockdown, our jewelers have been working from their home workshops. Special thanks to Tren, who is instrumental in the design of these pieces, who's featured here and who's allowed us into his home to show us his remarkable craft and skills. Thanks for joining us as we share a behind-the-scenes look at product development for Passman's new Tortuga line extension. The most important part of the design development process is creating the prototype, which this video shows. Prototypes allow us to test fully formed pieces for appearance, weight, and wearability to make sure that by the time it's offered to you on our website or in one of our retail partners' stores, it's true to the designer's intent and perfect for you. The design process starts with a sketch or sometimes just a written brief. From there, a CAD artist creates a digital design and prints it on a 3D wax. We had started to film this, but it turns out that almost no one is interested in watching an hours-long video of someone clicking and typing away at their computer. So we've skipped ahead to the more interesting parts. Here, our jeweler uses a compressor to inject molten wax into the cavity of a silicone mold. In the past, the mold would have been made using a hand-carved wax. Increasingly, though, original waxes are grown on a 3D printer, as was the case here. Allowing the wax to cool briefly, we see the forms of our fouled Anchor and Seahorse prototypes. To begin preparing the waxes for casting, the jeweler takes a rubber base and inserts a wax sprue. Since he's casting only a few prototypes, the sprue is trimmed short, but in production where dozens or even hundreds of pieces are cast at once, the length of the sprue is limited only by the length of the flask. An iron is used to meld the waxes to the sprue and create a tree. This is a deceptively difficult step requiring years of experience to perfect, as waxes must be arranged in such a way to allow the free flow of the molten metal while being careful not to waste space or materials. Once the tree is complete, the flask is attached to the rubber base. Tape is used to seal any seams to ensure that none of the investment leaks out before it's dry and cured. With the wax tree complete and the flask attached to the base, the investment is prepared. The investment material is similar to plaster of Paris, but it's much thinner. The low viscosity of the liquid allows the investment to adopt every detail and feature of the wax, no matter how minute. The investment is poured into the flask, immersing the wax tree entirely. The flask is placed into a vacuum. The resulting low-pressure environment causes the liquid investment to boil at room temperature, and the boiling removes any air bubbles from the investment which could cause a disastrous cast. After allowing the liquid to solidify, the rubber base is removed from the flask, exposing the end of the wax sprue. The flask is placed into the furnace and subjected to a burnout lasting a couple of hours under increasing temperatures up to about 1300 degrees Fahrenheit. This melts away the wax, leaving a negative impression of the jewelry to be cast, in this case our Anchor and Seahorse, inside the investment. It also cures the investment, making it impervious to the high heat required to melt gold, and makes the investment hard and brittle, which will become important later when it becomes time to remove the casting. The flask with the cured investment is removed from the furnace, placed into the centrifugal casting machine, and locked into place. The crucible is fixed next to the opening left by the wax sprue, which melted away in the furnace. The crucible is made from graphite, or in this case, a ceramic. Into the crucible is placed gold casting grain. For these prototypes, we're using 18 karat gold, which is made up of 75% pure gold and 25% silver, copper, and other precious and base metals. A pinch of borax flux is added to the grain to ensure an even flow of the molten metal into the flask. And this is where the real fun begins. Let no one fool you. The reason that any of us gets into jewelry making is to blast away with an acetylene torch and fling 1800 degree Fahrenheit molten gold around at 360 RPM. Yes, there are kilns that can melt the grain in a sedate or even dainty way, and yes, there are vacuum overpressure casting machines that create precise atmospheric and temperature conditions without all the crude movement, but come on, fire and spinning. It's the centripetal force from the spinning motion pushing the molten gold into all the parts of the flask and forcing out any air bubbles which might cause porosity and imperfections in the casting. The gold in the flask is solidified, but it and the surrounding investment is still very hot. The flask is carefully removed from the casting machine and quenched in a bucket of cool water. The thermal shock causes the hard, brittle investment to disintegrate, and the casting is retrieved and the remaining investment is scraped away. Once the initial cleaning is complete, the casting is ready to be snipped from the tree, burnished, inlaid, set, and polished. The gold pieces that aren't jewelry, the sprue and the feeders, are refined and recycled as casting grain and used in future jewelry production. As with every piece in our Passman collection, the inlay for our prototypes are hand-carved and hand-fitted to the casting. It's an exacting, time-consuming process, but having this remarkable skill in-house is what lets us bring you new designs and custom pieces. Once the jeweler is content that the inlay is perfect, it's seated. All inlay is secured to the casting with a special epoxy and in most cases pinned as well. Here the laser is used on the seahorse to apply the hallmark and our maker's mark. Cleaner and more flexible than the old punch, although a little less romantic, it means that we can personalize your purchase with any inscription or image that you'd like. A laser welder is used to affix the bail to the seahorse, and the opening is manually adjusted for symmetry to accept the right gauge of chain. A final cleaning, polishing, and plating is done, and the prototype is ready to wear and be tested. Thank you for watching. Look in the comment section below to find links to pre-order these pieces, order other Passman pieces, or call or email us with questions. Thank you.